Hello and welcome to the Inside Track, the podcast where we chat about all the things that give you the edge in the world of innovation, business, design, tech, and culture. I'm Fuzlin Esau, and today we're joined by Derek Gibb, once again, our Commercial Director for Hedgehog Lab, as well as our guest, Scott Ogilvie, Global Director of AI Strategy for Wood Group, and James Colasante, who is part of the graduate program over at Wood. Before we jump in, I would love to know a little bit more about you and your journey, Scott, within the industry.
Sure. So I work with Wood Group, as you've quite rightly put there, and Wood Group is the world's leading consultants, engineers, and project delivery experts across energy and material markets, so oil and gas, renewables, chemicals, mining, etc. And I've kind of always been in that digital side, but probably for the last 30 years been working with energy clients in oil and gas, so the likes of BP, Shell, etc., all the obvious badges. And as digital has evolved, and it's always been about the data as well, I've just had a number of roles that have allowed me to, meet with the CIOs of these various clients from a technology perspective, but I also had big exposure to a lot of the people on the business side. So, bringing that invaluable context into why do we do digital, what's the importance of data, which all then allows me, I think, to be in a better position to understand how we can exploit new technologies like Gen AI, etc.
James, now graduate programs are quite dear to our heart here at Hedgehog. What has been your experience this far?
Really good, actually, and really quite interesting. So I'm a mechanical engineer in Perth, Australia. The team that I work in is called Rotating Equipment and Reliability. So we deal with all things spinning, pumps, motors, compressors, turbines, that type of thing. We do performance assessments on them, monitor the condition of the assets, help to do RCAs when things break or go wrong, solving those problems, and sort of advising clients on what to do. And that sits within the consulting arm of the business. So that's my day job. And then on the side, I'm very involved in the sort of AI digital innovation space, both locally within our teams developing some tools.
Great. We'll jump straight in to our first question. One of the interesting tensions in the market right now is that hiring has always been based on fairly established signals like degrees, experience, and technical ability. But AI is starting to flatten those signals, especially at sort of an entry level position. Given we've got both sides of the coin here today, someone just entering and someone responsible for building teams and capabilities in AI strategy. In an AI-enabled world, what actually makes a graduate stand out today compared to 5 years ago? James, I'm going to have you kick this one off, since you've just obviously gone through the process.
Yeah, fair enough. And I'm very interested to hear what Scott has to say as well from his perspective, because I think that the hiring versus the doing are very different things, and how you might see that is quite different. I mean, just even to explain how quickly the market has moved, I graduated the end of 2022, 23, and then have been at Wood for a few years. When I graduated, like ChatGPT didn't exist yet. It wasn't a thing. So we moved just so quickly over that period. I think now the real differentiating factor for being a good graduate with AI is the ability to not just use it and not just understand it, but be able to use it without outsourcing your own technical judgment to it. And I think that is really key in an engineering context, that you can use this to enhance workflows, come up with drafts, but you still need to defer to some type of judgment and understanding. And so I know that there's a lot of commentary, especially around the degree thing. Degrees are dead, don't need one anymore. But I really think that having that domain knowledge, and it's something that Wood sort of has plenty of, and I've seen plenty of through all of the experts that we have and I get to work with, having that knowledge there, understanding when we we need to check things and check assumptions and then check what's going in and out of these models is really, really crucial. I think AI is very, very good at being very confident. It is not very good at being very correct at times. And so I think it's important to really differentiate between those two. And I think that the model is changing. You know, a lot of that grunt work can now be automated, and that's okay. But I think that for a lot of the things that we do, having that differential there is still really, really important. And I think it just changes what grads do. They're not just sort of cheap production labor anymore. Like, they can be used much differently and maybe much more effectively, and probably brought up to being able to give some of that judgment much, much faster, because they can be exposed so much more, and even in their own internal progress, see so much more. And I think it's a little bit of a dangerous game that some firms or businesses are sort of playing with. We just don't need to hire juniors or grads or early career talent anymore because we can outsource that. That's fine until suddenly you run out of senior people to do this checking and to verify this knowledge, and all of this goes away. So I think you have some short-term gains, but I think that in the long term, you need to be really careful of what capability are you still developing. And so I think the role of a grad is definitely starting to change, and I think AI is enhancing that, and if done correctly, will make businesses far more efficient, and grads actually able to do a lot more and to take a lot more ownership and responsibility of those outcomes.
I think James has given some fantastic themes in there. I think what's difficult now is, we're all becoming trained in spotting something that's been written by ChatGPT or Copilot. And I think we've become even more cynical than we maybe used to be about what we read and how much we trust it. So I think from a graduate, it must be really difficult to stand out, because the first job is get to the interview, which is writing words on a page or an email and submitting it and hoping that it stands out in some way. And if you're really, really good and you know how to do that, do you then just get put on that one's too good, that must be Copilot? Now, that still people filter through that. So let's give me a quick example. My friend was interviewing for a project manager last week, and they whittled it down to 4 CVs. 3 of them were pretty good. One of them was, just excellent, but it passed the sniff test. They didn't think it was Copilot or anything. Did the first 3 interviews, they all went quite well. And then they had this lady with the CV, and they were asking her open leading questions to get her to talk about the experience, and kind of give her space to explore it a bit more. And when they asked her the questions, she pulled out a Post-it pad and she was flicking through, looking to try and find a relevant answer. My mate's thinking, the perfect answer is right in the middle of your CV. Why are you not talking about that one? So he asked one question and turned to his colleague and was like, I don't think I have any more questions. Do you? And he obviously picked up on it, like, no, we'll end the interview there. So I think things still get through. James is right that I used to interview loads of people, and you would know pretty quickly from your gut whether they were the right type of people. Whether they're curious, they can exercise good judgment, you think they can fit into the team. And for us, it's about, we don't want to create AI engineers, because Wood differentiates because we have that domain experience. That's what our USP is. And yes, we can augment and enhance that with AI. But when I was looking at where does our AI capability come from, the graduate pot's an obvious place to go dip into. And I'm pretty sure if I said, right, who wants to come build AI stuff? All the hands would shoot up. But I don't want them to become AI people. I want them to be really good engineers. So there's quite a fine balance there. You also have to, from an attracting and a retention perspective, allow them to have access to the tools, because, they're just the way of working now. And, the graduates have got, and I see it every day, some fantastic of ideas of how they take current processes, are looking at how do you understand the standards better, and can get to working from being a junior to actually working best practice very quickly. So we built, for example, some small agents where the engineer from for a process engineer, we've taken the process and the calculations, etc., put it in the tool, and the engineer or the graduate can interact with the tool to get to the right answer, rather than hassling the senior engineer to figure out even where to look for some of this stuff. So there's lots of ways we can kind of enhance the experience for the graduate. But yeah, I think it must be difficult for them to stand out in the early days. One of our colleagues was at a university in England last week, and the university was bemoaning the fact that they've now got to weave AI training throughout every part of the degree, because people, we now expect graduates to turn up and know how to use AI, whether we've trained them or not. So I think our expectations of grads has changed, perhaps unfairly.
Really awesome point, and it's actually both of you hit on something that I hadn't really thought of as well, because you hear about the stuff about it's hard to get started. Yes, you've covered that point, but then I was thinking about how do you actually build foundational knowledge, and you've kind of touched on that as well. So I guess the question is it true in fact that acceleration path from being a grad to being someone who's making more senior level decisions, and is that path now shorter to get there? It seems like it might well be for a James, for example.
I think it can be, but there's also a risk. I was thinking about this other day where a CFO gets to CFO because they started at the ground. They did their accounting exams, and then they came in and they worked in Excel, and they've seen the data come in. They understand the calculations that are in there, and then so they've watched cash flow through the company, and then they've maybe done some auditing, and then they've maybe done some cash flow modeling, etc. And all the while, they're understanding how the business is moving cash around. And so they have that experience that they grow and they develop all the way through the layers. And then at some point, somebody thinks, yeah, they're the next CFO because they understand the business and how to manage the money. If you think about what we're talking about there, Derek, is if we can fast track some of that knowledge and insight, it doesn't necessarily mean they've got the experience to make the right judgment as well. And do they then start to depend on the tools? And we see that with some kind of just core developers who come in and they're relying on Cloud Code to go and develop code, and it doesn't work. And they've no idea why it doesn't work. So then we've got seniors having to step back in and unravel it all, educate why it's done that, and then get back to developing code. So actually it's taking more time.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said for hands-on experience and but augmenting it. And certainly in the oil and gas industry, it's been long documented that it's a very aging workforce. And all of that tacit knowledge is going to start leaking out. But I think through the use of AI tools, even things like, getting the grads to interview them on Copilot and having the transcript recorded and then putting that into a knowledge system allows us to start, capturing some of that knowledge before it just disappears. So I think AI can give us lots of tricks and tools, but it's still going to come down to the quality of the graduate, the curiosity that the grads have to want to understand the industry, and then augment that rather than just being distracted by shiny toys.
AI is often talked about as if it's purely a software with models, tools, applications, and those sort of things. But there's always been more to it, that second layer to the conversation, which is the actual physical reality of it. The energy required to run these systems, the infrastructure needed to support them, and the materials that make it possible is a huge conversation right now. And organizations like Wood sit much closer to the systems that actually power that future. What do technology leaders misunderstand about the relationship between AI innovation and the energy, materials, infrastructure needed to sustain it?
Yeah, it's something that comes up all the time, and everyone can contact you, how much electricity it takes to run one AI query. Can you imagine when you start running LLMs, how much electricity that's generating? And so the International Energy Agency is predicting that the electricity demand by 2030 will double, and it's already increasing, and not just because of AI. But you're right, from our perspective, we kind of see it from underneath, from that infrastructure perspective. And, we've done a lot of work in the past designing, refineries and chemical plants, etc. One of the things we've been doing over the last couple of years when the whole renewable thing came along was, we've got these tools that run all these calculations to figure out if I have an asset here and I want to have more hydrogen power, then how can I maximize taking power from the grid, taking solar, taking wind, and at any given point, figure out what the optimum use of each is, not just from a green perspective, but obviously from a cost perspective as well, because the economics have to add up. And we'll run these calculations before anything's built to actually figure out, okay, where do you put the hydrogen plant? Do you have it close to the water, to the sea? We need fresh water, etc. So that's been a thing that we've been doing for years. And now the demand is changing the conversation. When you think about an AI campus, it's effectively sitting on a mining stack. You need copper and gallium, etc. And it's been well documented, especially COVID, is the use of gas. Gases has got low carbon intensity. It's 99.99% reliable. The speed to market's much, much faster. And in Australia, for example, they're anticipating doubling the amount of data center capacity in the next 5 years. But because of the speed of it, of processing power, etc., you don't actually have to build a data center next to the end users as much as you used to. So you can imagine in Australia, they've got loads of space to go build data centers. So one of the things we're now starting to look at designs for is, do you co-locate gas infrastructure with a data center rather than the old way of, I suppose the whole gas market will be changing. The demands, the typical and historical demands on gas processing could fundamentally shift the whole commercial model and start to look at, okay, do we actually move gas and actually develop it or build data centers next to where the gas is coming out? So there's a whole raft of conversations happening around that. Taking it back to your question, I think people think about AI as software. And it's not. It doesn't scale like software. It scales more like hardware and infrastructure. And unfortunately, that all takes a long time. Even so, the queues so it's like a grid interconnection queue for having your project being allowed to connect to the electricity grid, for example. In the tier 1 markets, the waiting time is 5 to 7 years. So if you start building that into, okay, I want to build a data center, the long-term modeling is massive. So there's a number of challenges that are really impacting the way that people are thinking about how they will scale and use AI. And the reality is, it's so far behind. It's it's obviously trying to catch up. Whether it's the minerals, even transformers, for example, the lead time on transformers is 2 to 3 years. So it just can't keep up. Being kind of technologists, then we'll figure out how to make the AI more efficient. But when we do that, then we just think, oh, this is great. This is really efficient. So we'll start throwing more agents on top of it. And then we'll just generate the need for more power. So I don't think it's a problem we've fixed. I think everybody recognizes the challenge, but I don't think there's enough people trying to figure it out at the moment, or those who are desperate to kind of jump on the AI bandwagon are just kind of not blind, but probably oblivious.
It's easy to jump on sound bites, isn't it, and get a headline
Yeah.
very, very easy. But it's also easy to be completely oblivious to the problems that exist. And a weird connection between some of what you were saying at the start, James, around like the older workforce dripping out of the market, or like no longer there, having that knowledge, and this challenge as well. Because my uncle is in his 70s, and like he's technically been retired for about 20 years, but like he keeps getting these phone calls. He's been in oil and gas. He's an electrical engineer, but he's designed oil and gas work stuff for the past like 5 decades. But now he keeps getting calls like, "Can you come to Louisiana and help us build a data center?" Like all this sort of stuff. And like I didn't know this for a long time. So like, he was talking about AI. I was like, "Oh, it's very cool. You're interested in AI." He's like, "No, I'm building the infrastructure for it." I was like, "Wow, okay, very cool, very, very cool." But as I say, so like that's like it's maybe the extreme end of it. But yeah, I think there's still those challenges of knowledge and also global energy requirements for it. They're very, very interrelated.
Yeah, and is it going to be the people who win in AI aren't the ones that create the best LLM models, etc.? Is it going to be the ones that actually figure out how I'm going to get my hands on power to actually support my data center?
We have yet another AI question, but this one's a little bit different. So, sport has become one of the most visible testing grounds for a lot of AI. And you can see this at the World Cup. From automated officiating decisions to performance analytics to real-time tactical insight that would have been impossible just a few years ago. But with this also comes the deeper question of where the line is. So when tech like this stops supporting and starts interfering with human experts, at what point does better technology stop enhancing the experience and start changing the nature of the game itself? And this has been a big question throughout this whole week for us.
I'm going to let James have a quick part of this because he works in a great, proud sporting nation being Australian. I'm Scott, so I'll follow up just behind that. When I go on to why R didn't spot that Scotland should add a penalty in the World Cup. But James, over to you first.
Yes, we're still in. Just. I think it's interesting. I think we're pushing towards, I don't know, maybe what the edge of people are willing to accept at this point. It feels like we're getting a bit close. Some of the decisions that I've seen, I can't remember which match it was in, but it's an offside goal by a toe, and all the neutrals are like, okay, are we like, is this what's happening now? I think it's starting to ruffle feathers. I think there's a few key points. I think if it helps to resolve issues or like were they offside, did it cross the line, there's all of these like very factual black and white things that it can definitely help with. And then I think there's a good piece around explaining it to some of the fans, so explaining how this technology works to get people sort of on board with it. And then I think, yeah, as you were saying, the risk is where it starts to steer it a little bit differently. And I think what Scott and I were chatting about something else the other day, and this came up, how FIFA are now giving all of this sort of AI data to teams after like pre and post match, and they have all of this stuff to do with. And some countries or teams or whoever are going to be much more capable or able to do something with that data. And so does this just turn into a tech arms race for who has the best model to then ingest this and generate insights and then therefore change the way that they play, their strategies like positioning, momentum, all of these type of elements? And it becomes a system versus system, and we're not playing sport, is there? Like F1, it's just car versus car type situation. So there's some real risks to it. I don't think that governing by, not just in soccer and for FIFA, but I think all governing bodies and all sporting bodies want their sport to continue to evolve. I don't think anyone wants it to stand there and say, having no tech in this, it's going to be the same in 20 years as it is today. I don't think that's the approach. I think where they do need to be careful is sort of leading the game astray, perhaps. And I think the purists will probably agree with that. But I think it's fine if they do have that tech in there. There's a lot of people that are interested in that, and it creates a new maybe client market for them, for people to engage in this. Particularly, I come back to F1 because I feel like F1 is very technology driven. A lot of engineers like F1 because it is very technology driven, and that stats tech component about the sport is actually the draw card. And so I wonder if other sports are now looking at this going, can we try and capitalize on a little bit of that, because it has been so successful in Formula One. But I think, yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the times that if everyone's sort of starting to look around at each other and saying, oh, did that need to be called like that, and sort of bringing that into question, I think we might be pushing the envelope a little far.
I think though, James, there is benefit from it. I know. So the All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team, for a very long time have used data to protect their players. So the national team tracks data on all of the players and has the authority to go to the players' club and say, this player's been overworked or he's at risk of injury. You need to stop playing him at the weekend because we have an international match coming up. So you can imagine when you start using AI to, do deeper analysis of that, we'll be finding all sorts of new insights. And I think while I think that disrupts, the people that maybe don't follow their national team and prefer their local team will be upset by that. But fundamentally, it's protecting the athlete from injury. So that can only be a good thing, I think. My sport, don't really follow football, being Scottish. I do follow the rugby, but my sport is golf, and there's lots of talk about AI in golf and how it can enhance your golf swing, how it can enhance the equipment, how it can give you better analysis of how you're actually getting around the golf course. It doesn't help me when I'm standing on the first tee in a match with a scorecard in my hand and I'm thinking, oh crap, it's just me and the golf ball again. AI is not helping me out at that point, and it's not controlling my heartbeat either. So I think there is a place for it for most of the time. My problem is, because I'm the AI guy, if I was to turn up on the first tee with, the latest AI driver because they're all called like AI smoke, and there's a new AI putter, and it's just not worth the abuse I would get to turn up at a golf course with an AI branded anything. But I think it does help, if I'm feeling nervous and I don't hit the best shot off the tee, the technology quite often does still get that ball down the fairway. I was actually came up with TV the other day, some golf from the 80s, back in the early Nick Faldo days, and they're all wearing really jumpers, and the scores that they were getting, they were playing St Andrews, and I've played the course twice, the old course, and where they were driving the ball to, I'm thinking, I can drive the ball further than that, and I'm not as good as they are. So it just shows the difference and the impact that technology has. And a lot of golf courses are having to extend the length of the golf course just to make it more difficult for these guys to still reach it in two. But some of the golf courses, they only got so much real estate. And so, they're kind of struggling with people coming out and just scoring really low scores around their golf courses. So yeah, I think James is right. I think each individual will have an opinion on it. I think data's always had a role to play in sport. AI is really just enhancing that. And yeah, Scotland still should have had a penalty, but but the VAR didn't give it. I'm only joking. I don't think it was a penalty, but.
So to finish the pod, we always like to ask what your cultural pick of the week is. So best music, film, TV, design, or book you found that has inspired you this week. I want to shake it up a bit. Derek, what has inspired you this week?
I was thinking about this, and I'm going to go back to what we were talking about, data and World Cup. So I've got on my list to rewatch Moneyball, because I think it's an awesome concept in film. And then a lot of this, the World Cup's an excellent example of. I'll take it back. So like Brighton, Tony Bloom created this data model, and then suddenly this team that wasn't really doing anything is now the most efficient at scouting and finding talent, and it's now become a machine. So they get players unheard of, really cheap, and then sell them to Chelsea for 50 million quid. Basically, and I'm a Chelsea fan, so it's painful. That's cool. But that also is meaning that, take it into Scotland now, Hearts are doing the same thing, and it's creating more competition because teams who have performed to a certain level now performing much, much higher. And that's happening in the World Cup as well. And like there's this the scouting network is now powered by data, and also because of generations of people who've gone to so I think it's one of the African nations, which was previously a Belgian colony, for example. So there's got these people who are maybe 2 generations down, who maybe haven't grown up throughout the African systems of football education, have maybe done it in the Eredivisie or something. And like it's leveling the playing field for a lot of nations as well, because they've got access to more talent. So I think that's really quite interesting and cool. I wish Scotland could get better at it, because we've got a couple of people who aren't necessarily Scottish, but we could be doing with maybe another 11. So just to help a little bit.
Scott, what has inspired you this week?
Slightly cheating. I'm going to talk about a book that I haven't actually read. Was that?
Wait a minute.
He picked up the back of it.
Mary's Nexus, and I'd heard about it before. I was at a conference last week, and I was at one of the, obviously the AI conference, and there was a round table session, and somebody started talking about the book because they'd just finished reading it. And the emotion that was pouring out of her kind of took me aback. And then there was a few other people who'd read the book, and they jumped on it as well. And basically, he talks about information networks from the Stone Age through to AI. And it talks about how AI is driving social networks, and gives some real life examples of some pretty horrible stuff that's happened because an AI had been programmed to react in a certain way to certain events, and it had no emotion in there, and it was just reacting, and it caused some pretty horrible things to happen. But it talks about how, all the way through since the Stone Age, we've always had access to data, and it ends up about the people that, you can use data to unite people, or it may divide people, but the people that control the tools are the ones that got the power, and they can either use that to manipulate people or to enlighten people, etc. So I think the whole concept of it is quite fascinating, because it reflects a few other things that I've seen and listened to online, where, going back to the Facebook days, how at that point we didn't really recognize the impact Facebook was going to have, certainly on the younger generations. We did nothing really to regulate it at the start. And I think we need to become more informed and smarter. Don't end on a sad note. The potential that they have, for all the things we've been talking about today, if they're used in the right way, they've got massive potential to make lives better. So yeah, that's the book I'm going to cheat and refer to. And at least I didn't pretend I'd read it.
What was the name of the book? It sounds fascinating. It really does.
It's called Nexus.
Nexus.
And it's by Harari. He's written quite a few books that a lot of people at the table had also read. So he's obviously well known. I had heard of it before, but just hadn't got around to it. But I have bought it, so I'm only half cheating. And I will read it.
You basically read it. If you've bought it, it's basically read.
Yeah.
James, what has inspired you this week?
There's a new season of The Capture. I'm not sure if anyone's. It's a BBC crime, drama, conspiracy type show. It originally came out, season 1, I think, was back in 2018, 2019. And without giving too much away, it's more or less there's a soldier who there's CCTV of him committing a crime, but it as it turns out, this footage is sort of faked, and it goes into, this is prior to AI really being a thing, but it was around when deepfakes were starting to hit the news and become a thing. And so it really plays on this, that you're taking what we consider to be this real hard evidence, and suddenly it's getting changed. And so it's a story of that, and there's a big sort of conspiracy about it. And so it's a very good show, but it really makes you think about how this stuff will just change, not just in a sort of business landscape or sport, but just like fundamental elements of the justice or the legal system and how these things work. And I think that sometimes we don't, I don't know, maybe understand or appreciate just how big some of those changes are going to be. For better and worse, there's definitely some downsides. You know, you look at something like video evidence 10 years ago is concrete as you can get, and maybe in 10 years' time, it just won't be considered like that anymore. So I think there's some real fundamental shifts that are going to occur. But with that, you know, plenty of really, really good opportunities to change how we do things for the better as well. So no, it's a very interesting show. If you like a good conspiracy thriller, I would recommend.
This is the best part of the podcast for me, because I just get to write down things to either read or watch. This is excellent.
It did remind me, though, I was telling James the other day, I don't know if you remember, it was just as Gen AI was becoming a thing, HSBC, I think it was a deputy CFO or the CFO got called onto a Teams call with full video, talking, etc., with the CEO and a couple of other from the leadership team. And during the meeting, they basically had her transfer $25 million into certain bank accounts. None of it was real, apart from her. But she was on a Teams call talking to her CEO, who was telling her what to do. So why would she not believe that? And at that point, nobody really understood what a deep fake was and didn't understand Gen AI. That was, when was that, James? Just 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Can imagine how sophisticated that would be now.
Well, yeah.
And so it's quite staggering, you know, how clever this technology is now.
It's certainly a step up from getting a dodgy email from your boss asking for some iTunes vouchers, isn't it? So,
Or a WhatsApp.
yeah, exactly. Oh, amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Terrifying, but great.
I'm not actually here. I've been
That's good. Say, are you a real man? I don't know if you are. You're just a zeros on my screen.
I think that the leading expert on deepfakes has just come out and said that he's not certain anymore. Like, it's gotten to the point where even he can't differentiate as clearly anymore on what is been generated and what is real. So
yeah.
And I think we only ever see the really bad stuff, the really obvious things we see and we notice it. But I think there's a lot more that's going through, that's kind of coming through the net that we just aren't seeing. And we're just going, oh yeah, that's got to be real. Well, thank you, James, Scott, Derek, for joining me this week. Thank you to everyone who's listening. To find out more about our sessions, our briefings, our product builders, or the network itself, head on over to our website, our social channels, or of course, follow this podcast for more. We will see you all next time. Thank you.